Thank you, Chris and I are delighted to be here. I do want to say in response to Dan's very provocative question, I'm not sure the federal government can afford a wing that big. I actually want to focus on the title of your program, the concept of the path to prosperity, and Abraham Lincoln. And I want to do so in a way that may help the press corps have a better understanding of why I'm staying in this race, and why I believe it actually matters to have a candidate focused on ideas and a candidate focused on solutions, and not just the usual politics. I think we're in deep trouble. I think this election may be as important as the election of 1860. I believe that we have an administration which combines radicalism with incompetence in a scale that's pretty remarkable. And I think that the results are the longest period of unemployment since the Great Depression, an unemployment which is frankly much deeper than the current numbers, because if we had the same size workforce we had the day Barack Obama was sworn in, we'd be at 10.8% unemployment. The fact is, what's happened is people have literally given up. Gallup estimates that between the unemployed, the underemployed, and those working part-time who'd like to work full-time, the accurate number is 19%. That fits what's happening in Europe, where in countries like Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece, you're seeing catastrophic collapse of the system. Spain now is in the worst depression it's been in, some have argued, since the 1660s, certainly the worst economic problems since the Spanish Civil War. All of this is likely to get worse before it gets better. And the price of gasoline, in that sense, is an enormous threat to this economy, because if it gets, this morning I'm told it was $4.25 downtown in Chicago, that literally eats up everybody's discretionary income. They're not going to go buy anything else. And so we have a real series of challenges. We have a deeper challenge, which you know in Springfield, which we know in Sacramento, we know in Albany, and that is that the systems of governance that we've inherited are decaying. That you now have interest groups so powerful that democracy is simply a shadow event floating on top of the power of the interest groups. It's literally irrelevant who wins in California. They can't change Sacramento. It's virtually irrelevant in Albany. I would say it's largely irrelevant in Springfield. And increasingly it's becoming true in Washington. The level of effort it would take to change the system is beyond the imagination of most elected officials and beyond the imagination of most candidates. And that's where we are. Now Lincoln, I think, gives us some hints that are really, really important and which most of the modern Republican Party doesn't have a clue about. Lincoln in 1859 stands at Council Bluffs, Iowa, looks across the Missouri, and says we need a transcontinental railroad. And as a deliberate strategy to bind California to the Union, they design a project of such enormous scale that there's no comparable modern example. They complete the railroad in 1869. But what makes Lincoln amazing, and typical, I would argue, of the kind of Republican that Reagan was, even though Reagan had begun his life as a Democrat, was an intuitive, deep belief in technology and in science. And the thing I find most disheartening about this campaign is the difficulty of talking about positive ideas on a large scale, because the news media can't cover it, and candidly my opponents can't comprehend it. And the result is you can't have a serious conversation. It doesn't fit. It doesn't count. There's no different. And yet Lincoln, now what makes this amazing is the railroad was invented in 1829 in Great Britain. The first railroad engine arrives in the United States in 1831. Lincoln has never seen a railroad engine. But he's read about it, and he gets it. And he understands that if you have the great prairies of Illinois, that a railroad would be better than Wall Street. And so in his very first campaign, he's calling for technological change. He goes on to become a railroad lawyer, won one of the most important cases on navigation on the river that decisively changed American transportation history. In addition, he's the only president to have had a patent. He actually patented a particular mechanical device for As president, he spent time on a regular basis having people come by with various new kinds of war-making capabilities. And Britain showing him on the old Navy Yard, and people wander in with all sorts of things. The Gatling gun would be an example, or a torpedo. This is a very technologically advanced person. I experienced the same thing with Ronald Reagan. Because Reagan had grown up in the rural America at a time when movies were silent films. His first job was in radio in eastern Iowa. His second job was in WHO. He was a radio broadcaster at a time when it was illegal to broadcast the news. I was in one night, the newspaper had passed a law that radios had an unfair distribution advantage, and therefore they should not provide that news because it would drive newspapers out of business. So it was really technically illegal to broadcast news. Reagan one night told a very poignant story about the earthquake of 1932 in Los Angeles, and knowing that many Iowans were in Los Angeles, that he and the engineer worked out that they would accidentally lower the volume of sound from the big band coming from New York and read the telegrams as they came in from Los Angeles and accidentally be picked up reading the telegrams about the earthquake. And they did. It says remarkable, 2 o'clock in the morning, AP Los Angeles wrote, the building is now falling in. This is AP Los Angeles signing. The reason I say this is Reagan goes from growing up as a child before there's an airline to reporting for the nation when the Challenger blows up. In one lifetime. So we have this innate sense. He used to always say, you ain't seen nothing yet. And he believed it. We are at the edge of such extraordinary opportunities that it is so hard to get this party to understand it. We're at the edge of extraordinary opportunities. We can provide for the American people such a dramatically better future that it's almost unimaginable. And our political system is so methodically and deliberately stupid. And I use that word deliberately. The willful avoidance of knowledge. But it's astonishing. One of the reasons I ran for president, I spent years trying to convince the Bush administration that if they would provide modern technology to the health system, that they would save lives and save billions of dollars. One example. American Express has a sufficiently sophisticated anti-fraud system. The 0.03 of 1% of American Express is spent on fraud. New York State Medicaid spends more than 10% of gross. That means as a taxpayer, you are 330 times, 33,000% more likely to pay a crook than you are as an American Express customer. Now that's just willful avoidance of the modern world by bureaucrats who believe in a paper-based 9-to-5 system that is utterly and totally incompetent. So the bureaucrat with paper competing with a crook who has a knife. And that's the modern world. And nobody seems to be willing to break out. Second example, we've had a technological revolution in how we get natural gas and oil. And this revolution is only in the last decade. And it has changed everything. And virtually nobody in Washington gets it. The state of North Dakota, 15 years ago, had 150 million barrels of recoverable oil. I was campaigning a week ago, reporting that the state of North Dakota has 4 billion barrels of recoverable oil. 2 days ago, they reported that they now believe they have 24 billion barrels of recoverable oil. And the fact is, they believe with another generation of technology, that 20 or 25 years from now, there will be 500 billion barrels of recoverable oil. This is North Dakota. This isn't Alaska. This isn't California, where the Monterey Formation, we believe, has 80 billion barrels. This is one small state. The current unemployment rate is 3.5%, and that overstates it because they have 16,000 jobs they can't fill in the oil patch because the people on unemployment go to other states. This is why I propose that we modernize unemployment compensation So you have to take a training program if you get unemployment compensation. So we're improving this. The same breakthrough in drilling technology has led to us moving from a position where we had 7 years of natural gas supply, and we were about to start importing billions of dollars of liquefied natural gas from the Middle East. Today, we have 125 years of natural gas supply, and we're about to start exporting liquefied natural gas to China. And even the president has said that it's probably worth 600,000 jobs over the next decade just in natural gas. So when I campaign on $2.50 a gallon gasoline, this is actually an understatement. If the price of gasoline were to drop as much as the price of natural gas has dropped in the last 4 years, it would be $1.13 a gallon. I'm not reporting on theory, I'm not reporting on ideology, I'm telling you that factually, in the last 4 years, we've increased the production of natural gas in the U.S. by 11%, and the price of natural gas has dropped so dramatically that if it were applied comparably to gasoline, it would literally be $1.13. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's exactly parallel, there are various technical differences, but I'm suggesting the direction is the same, and the fact that the Secretary of Energy yesterday decided that he was no longer for $9 or $10 a gallon gasoline tells you how cheap. I've been in the running fight at the White House for 2 weeks now. This is an issue every Republican in the country could use to drive home 2 or 3 things. One, we're not in the business of punishing the American people liberals are. 2, we're not in the business of taking away your choice of what kind of car or truck to buy, liberals are. 3, we believe in science and technology, it's liberals who oppose it. 4, we believe in American energy, so no president ever again bows to a Saudi king. He was thrilled that the Saudis are going to pump more oil. None of us should be thrilled that the Saudis want to make sure that we're dependent on Saudi Arabia. Our mission as a national security item should be complete energy independence so we can say to the Europeans, the Chinese, and the Indians, you have a problem in the Straits of Hormuz, we don't. You had better step up to the bar, and you had better solve your problem, because it's no longer our problem. Technology and grand opportunities. Again, in the language other than Ronald Reagan, I know of no Republican in my lifetime who's been able to talk about it. That's why I'm still running. Because the vacuum is so huge. Fact is, the person who's done the most to develop North Dakota said 2 or 3 weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal, if we were to open up federal land and we were to open up offshore, in the course of the next generation, the federal government would earn between 16 and 18 trillion dollars in royalties. Not billion, trillion. Now what does that mean? It means if you did what we did when I was Speaker, and I'm the only Speaker in your lifetime to get to 4 consecutive balanced budgets, if you were to balance the budget and impose fiscal discipline, you could then create the royalties into a debt repayment fund, and by the time the youngest people in this room were retiring, you would owe 0 U.S. national debt. You would have paid off the federal debt. You can develop an energy program which simultaneously liberates you from the Saudis and the Straits of Hormuz and liberates you from the Chinese, which simultaneously creates American jobs, keeping American energy, producing here at home, strengthening the dollar by no longer sending $500 billion overseas, and creating a huge flood of revenue, which a disciplined government could use to pay down the national debt. All this can happen with a fight over policy. By the way, the last time we tested this, this is a 79-16 issue. By better than 4-1, this country thinks Obama is wrong on this topic. We could campaign for the rest of the year on $2.50 a gallon gasoline, energy independence, paying off the federal debt, and creating American jobs with American energy. And we'd be in pretty good shape. I'll just give you one last example. But I want you to understand that I am running because I believe we have got to go back to what worked in 1980, what worked in 1984, and what worked in 1994 and 1996. And that is a politics of big ideas. What crashed in 2006 was trying to govern as though we were Democrats. We cannot be a normal party. If we run a normal campaign trying to govern within the framework of the current system, we have no future because people would rather have Democrats doing it, they at least enjoy it. We are miserable trying to govern within their system. We are in the business of changing Washington, not being accepted by it. It's fundamentally different now. Just give you one last example. I've talked about it on now for over a year, about the need for a brain science project. I helped double the National Institutes of Health budget while balancing the federal budget, because we established priorities and we said biological and medical research is a priority for America. I believe we're within a very short time of major breakthroughs on autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, mental health, and a range of other brain activities. That would save so many million families from pain and save so many $1 trillion in the federal budget that it may well be the best single investment we could make in creating a better future. But it requires fundamentally rethinking how we do brain research. It requires fundamentally being prepared to invest, and it requires having the vision to establish large goals and have the courage to go up and risk being ridiculed. Just give you one closing example. I spent 3 years with former Democratic Senator Bob Kerrey, co-chairing the task force on Alzheimer's, so I've spent a fair amount of time on this. You simply postpone the onset of Alzheimer's by 5 years. Without cure, just slow down the onset by 5 years. You save between now and 2050 between $6 and $8 trillion. There is no activity in the U.S. Congress, nothing that is politically sustainable, that saves anything like that kind of money. So I want to run as a candidate of a better life, greater independence, more health, with families that are better off at dramatically lower cost, because I want to be the candidate of science and technology, whether it's on energy, it's on stopping crooks in Medicare and Medicaid, it's on getting into space, for which I was ridiculed, or it is on helping you make sure that your family doesn't suffer from something that could be avoided. I think that becomes the problem. Thank you.
We'll enjoy our dinner, and then we'll continue the program after dinner with some of our congressmen. So